It was the Voting Rights Act that slayed Jim Crow. And now the Supreme Court has decided to slay that.
From Interfaith Alliance, this is The State of Belief, where religion and democracy meet. I'm Interfaith Alliance President Reverend Paul Brandeis Rauschenbusch in New York City.
This is a very important moment for us, that everything seems so consequential. But truly, this is a reckoning.
In the past 2 weeks, the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act, and the controversial Presidential Anti-Christian Bias Task Force issued a 560-page report. Predictably, a lot of it focuses on partisan politics, including attacks on the previous administration's alleged anti-Christian bias. Well, my guest this week, Reverend Thomas L. Bowen, is uniquely qualified to address these charges. After all, he served as senior advisor for faith engagement in the Biden White House.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
We need these voices to be heard now more than ever, so please make sure you subscribe, share, and rate The State of Belief on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcast platform. Taking a minute to do those things really helps other people discover our show, become listeners, and become part of the movement to save our democracy. Our library of past conversations includes well over 150 hopeful, empowering, and inspiring interviews with guests like Bishop William Barber, author Rebecca Solnit, Rabbi Sharon Brous, and so many others. You can help us grow The State of Belief with a financial contribution right now. So find out how at stateofbelief.com, and you can support and join the work of Interfaith Alliance at interfaithalliance.org. Before we turn to our interview with Reverend Thomas Bowen, I want to alert you to something that's happening on the Mall on May 17th. It's called Rededicate 250, a jubilee of praise, prayer, and gratitude. What this is actually a political display of power cloaked in religion. And they are saying everyone is welcome, but really, the video says it all. It's, starts with a cross on a flag, and basically they say, bring your church. So what they're really doing is inviting Christians to the mall, and the speakers are kind of the usual array of Christian nationalist speakers, but also includes members of this administration. Speaker Johnson, who called himself Moses, I guess, for the Jesus figure, who is Trump. Also will be Pete Hegseth, who, of course, quoted Pulp Fiction, thinking it was scripture. But this is actually dangerous. And the reason it's dangerous is because they will use this opportunity as we celebrate 250 years as a country to kind of claim that this country is really meant for Christians. It was founded by Christians. It was intended as a Christian country. It is a Christian nation. And it's an ahistorical effort to rewrite our history and the founding, which intentionally was founded with no establishment of religion and free exercise for all. And it's just so important that as we hear the rhetoric that will be amped up as we move towards July 4th, that this is a Christian nation and that, we should be celebrating that. And it belies the fact that, we think of George Washington's letter to the Hebrew congregation in Newport in, I think, 1796, where he says, we no longer speak about toleration of anyone else as if it was the power of one group to bestow upon another acceptance. In essence, his letter was like, everyone is equal here. It's really important to remember that's probably the smartest thing that our founders did, was not to establish religion. And so when we have an event on the Mall, which I'm sure some government money must be used on this, I don't have those figures in front of me, but my guess is, and they're not answering questions right now. When we have something like this, it's a missed opportunity to celebrate the incredible diversity that is religious people in America from all different backgrounds, from all different sizes and shapes and beliefs, and the power of that, and the brilliance of that and the possibility of moving forward with more diversity and also more solidarity and trust and love between people of different backgrounds. And so be on the lookout for this thing on May 17th. There will be some fanfare around it, but recognize the danger that is inherent in what they're trying to do on the Mall in Washington, D.C. And now to my guest. The Reverend Thomas L. Bowen has been senior advisor for faith engagement in the Biden administration and held advisory positions in the office of the mayor in our nation's capital, where he is also interim assistant pastor at Shiloh Baptist Church, a congregation he has served in various roles for almost a quarter of a century. Having earned the informal title, but important title, of DC's pastor, Reverend Bowen is currently General Secretary of the Progressive National Baptist Convention with 2.5 million members across the country. I'm so glad to welcome you back to the State of Belief.
It's a pleasure to be here, Paul. Thank you for all that you do each and every day.
Listen, I want to start out with this, new and very important role with the Progressive National Baptist Convention. Tell our listeners, in case they don't know, the history of the Progressive National Baptist Convention and why it has such an important place in the American religious landscape.
Well, thank you. This year, the Progressive National Baptist Convention celebrates 65 years. We were founded in 1961 by Dr. King and others, including Gardner Taylor, to be a spiritual home for the civil rights movement. Believe it or not, there were some clergy who didn't think that Dr. King and others should be as involved as they were in the civil rights movement, that there ought to be a little bit more air or separation. But the historical Black church is one in which we've always had to address certain issues and be prophetic in our walk and in our talk. So here we are, 65 years later, the Progressive National Baptist Convention. I'm proud to say that there are many well-known individual pastors and historic churches connected. I think chief among those these days would be Ebenezer Baptist Church, headed by Senator Reverend Raphael Warnock.
Isn't that wonderful? And it's such a important legacy. It's an important history and a recognition that, frankly, even within the Black church, and we can talk about the white church, but even within the Black church, there were people like, hey, go a little slow, or maybe too much politics talk. And I remember I had a chance to interview John Lewis, the great congressman, but also Reverend John Lewis, who said, now everybody claims that they were part of the civil rights movement. But at the time, there were churches who were on the fence. That was the reason why the Progressive National Baptist Convention is so important, is it gave a home for people to be unapologetic about understanding the prophetic role of the Black Baptist Church in concert with the wider religious community in America. And so I just think it's how wonderful that we're both Baptists. You never say you're like the head of anything or steering anything. What you are is trying to hold space for a great movement of people, all of whom have something unique and then special to offer. And so congratulations. And I want to come back to that because everything we're going to be talking about, frankly, is connected to that kind of idea of what is the church's role in this moment. But I am speaking to you just days after the Supreme Court has essentially gutted the work that Dr. King and so many other women and men around him did. The legacy of Dr. King really was betrayed by the Supreme Court. And I would just, like to get your reactions to that and how you're feeling right now, recognizing we're in a historic moment yet again.
Yeah, and, I heard someone else put it this way. It was the Voting Rights Act that slayed Jim Crow. And now the Supreme Court has decided to slay that and to kill that. This is a very important moment for us. And it seems like it's a broken record, right? that everything seems so consequential. But truly, this is a reckoning. And I have hope as I've been discussing with individuals since that decision, knowing that things happen and they're intentional, right? That I would have thought that decision like this, so weighty, would be handed down perhaps in the closing days of the court for the year in June. But handing the decision out on last week, it gave some states, although they've had to change and move on some voting date election days, it gave them a chance to respond, to go into to further gerrymander and damage and try to dilute the vote. But it's not just about the voter representation. We know that as a result, there will be fewer Black representatives in Congress who are there voicing their opinions on behalf of Black voters and those with a progressive mindset. But I think the last thing we can do is to roll over. I think the
Mm,
last thing we can do is to give up. We must fight even stronger than we have in the past. And there's room for us. There's room for us to increase our civic participation and our voter participation. So we need to double and get as close to 100% voting as possible. And I think that that will have an impact, particularly when it comes to those statewide elections, right?
mm.
Governorships and Senate seats. That's where we can really be the strongest.
Yeah. Well, I was listening to a speaker who was just really laying how consequential the Voting Rights Act was. Before the Voting Rights Act, it was almost negligible, the number of Black elected politicians across the country in any form, not just in Congress or Senate it was anywhere. And then, after the Voting Rights Act, it was it changed how the voice of Black Americans to truly participate in American democracy. I think people, because it feels like old history, we forget that. But this had a monumental shift and a real sense of, oh, okay, we have a voice and we can use it and we will affect policy. And unfortunately, since the beginning of the 1980s, it has been chipped away and chipped away. And now we're really at a point where it's rendered almost meaningless. And I think the rationale behind that is just like ridiculous, but it is part of this white Christian nationalist moment, which is that Black people do not experience racism anymore. Therefore, we do not need these, these kind of laws. It's like and it is, there could be nothing further from the truth. How do I think narrative is really important about what it was for, and how it was effective in actually making change, and then the effort to undermine it by generations of legal and political efforts. And so I'm just curious, what do you have to say to that?
I think that it's not by accident that what precipitated this was is the effort to keep us from telling the true history of our country, to be very select in that. So there are people who are not going to understand this, who if they are ahistorical will look at this somehow in some way and see it being discriminatory and not realize that the measure, the Voting Rights Act, was to counteract
Right.
the racism that existed. And for now to have folk forget that vital, that crucial part of our history and see the way that the districts, the map has been drawn and to see the remedy as being the problem,
Yeah.
the remedy is not the problem.
Right.
The remedy was the result of the racism that existed in our country. That if we're not careful, we're going to see it again.
Yeah. And I do think that, people, because of the direct, where it came from, and the impetus originally for the Voting Rights Act, was around Black Americans and the specific experience of Jim Crow and the incredible I mean, really systematic and incredible repression that that existed. The effect and is the benefit of it has benefited many communities. And that's a really important point. I've been in several calls where it's been really important, like, Latino voices were speaking up and saying, by the way, this really does affect us, and it would be really good to make sure that our organizing efforts in response recognize that we need to be part of the table because we want to be part of the solution as well. We want to be part of the pushback, and so I think it's an opportunity for coalition building and for us to continually reach out to people outside of who we might normally be talking to. Um, I really love this, and I've heard this from so many people in the Black leadership. It's just like, we are not giving up. We are not rolling over. We are going to be more powerful than ever. And in some ways, I just would love for you to talk about the spiritual grounding of that, because that's really what drove the Voting Rights Act. Like, the civil rights movement was a civic movement, but its fuel was spirituality that was not, from all different sides. It had so many great rivers of spiritual power that were going into it. But the mighty river was the Black religious Christian tradition. And I would love for you, when you're talking today about we have to dig deep, what well are you digging from?
Yeah, I think we're digging from a well, which is our ancestral history, or as someone else has said, our ancestral intelligence.
Mm.
Over my head, I hear music. There must be a God somewhere. That as the decision was handed down, there were individuals who made their way back into the church the Sunday following, because they understood that it's in the church, it's in the Black church, you get a sense of somebodyness. That's how you get a Jesse Jackson saying, I am somebody.
Mm.
And people needed to feel that. It's in the church that we organize around voting. It's in the church that we sing the songs that come to affirm us. It's in the church that we were able to put together in the Black church a theology that matches and meets this moment. That we're able to see and paint a picture of what it can be and what it should be, and march people towards that reality. That's when a prophetic teaching, for prophetic preaching comes into play. It doesn't matter what you see or don't see right now. That our faith, has been a gift, our faith which is a treasure, causes us to view and to see things just a little bit differently. And with all of those things working in concert, that we get the strength that we can muster to keep on not only moving, but to keep on fighting.
Mm. You know, I love that. And it made me think of, we had on this show Maria Stefan, who works with something called the Horizons Project. And she has studied anti-authoritarian movements all across the world. Do you know Maria? My guess is that you've intersected with her, because
I've heard the name. It's
yeah,
very
yeah,
familiar.
she's pretty amazing. And she has said, like, one of the gifts, in addition to all the organizing and the networks and all of that, one of the gifts of religious communities that are this deep spiritual well is that they have a vision for a future that is not totally dictated to by the reality on the ground right now.
Mhm.
Because authoritarians want you to believe that this is it. This is all there is, and there's no way you can ever work against it. And a faith like you were just describing, this music that calls us forward, this vision, this prophetic will that we know we're a part of, no authoritarian can really understand how to undercut that, because it actually doesn't involve them, which makes them want to have religion on their side too, because they want
Ew.
to undercut it. But what we know, and what you just so perfectly described, is that this is a powerful work forward. Up next, more with Reverend Thomas Bowen. You can hear full episodes of The State of Belief anytime on our website at stateofbelief.com. You'll find links to topics we discussed this week, as well as transcripts and more. And you can tell Alexa, Gemini, or Siri to play the podcast, The State of Belief, on any enabled device. Make sure you subscribe, share, and rate The State of Belief on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, or whatever your favorite podcast platform is. You're listening to The State of Belief, where religion and democracy meet. Welcome back to The State of Belief. I'm Interfaith Alliance President, Reverend Paul Brandeis Rauschenbusch. With me is Reverend Thomas Bowen, General.
Caitlin, you may have heard women are leaving the church. That's the story anyway.
But we need more evidence. So we're inviting our women listeners to share their stories of leaving the church, whether that's a specific congregation or the whole of institutional Christianity.
Whether you walked away gradually or all at once, whether it's been years or just recently, if you're a woman who's left a religious community behind, your story matters to us.
We're the hosts of the RNS podcast, Saved by the City, and we're working on a special episode about why so many women are leaving the church, and we'd love to include your voice.
Leave us a voice memo at speakpipe.com/Saved by the City, or send a recording to sbtcpodcast@religionnews.com. We can't wait to hear from you.
That's speakpipe.com/Saved by the City. We'd love to include your story.
Secretary of the Progressive National Baptist Convention. I know that you've already been thinking before this about the midterms. What are ways that your organization, well, it's not yours, again, careful to say, but you can see the Black church as well as specifically the Progressive National Baptist Convention. What are ways that you all are preparing for the midterms in light of what has just transpired with the Voting Rights Act?
Yeah, let me back up and say also, because I see in our studio audience James Cone raising his hand. And what he wants to tell us is that God is on the surprise on the side of the oppressed, or God is not God at all. And for those who would take issue with Black theology and liberation theology, and we know who they are and we know why, we can put it in simpler words, as a Cecil Cone would have wanted to do, and that is that God is on the side of those who have been wronged,
Hmm.
and that God is not on the side of those who are doing the wrong. I don't know how someone could really bring themselves to disagree with that. Uh, it's just hard. But your question is one of strategy and and moving beyond what has been the demise of Christianity in America, and that is thoughts and prayers. Dare I say, being upset and angry. We must turn that into something very positive. We must, strategize, and we must prepare ourselves. Yes, for the midterms, first and foremost, that is educating folk about the issues that matter to the most, and educating them about the issues that matter to the people who we want to get to pose the most, and drawing that connection to who we have in office and policies, and letting them know how they can right that wrong. If you don't believe that we ought to be involved in a conflict or a war in Iran, then guess what? You have an opportunity to vote. If you believe that our gas prices just are too hot, guess what? You have a chance to vote. If you believe that money is being wasted, if you will, on some of these federal agencies, or made their way into some of our streets, then you have a opportunity to vote. We educate people, and then we do the heavy lift of registering people to vote. That is a strength. But we know that there are people still trying to put obstacles.
Right.
So it's not just about registering to vote, it's being voter ready for election day, having the requisite ID, having a plan to get to the polls, knowing which poll is yours. Because it's just criminal that we live in a society that if a person goes to the wrong polls, those people working the polls are not obligated to point them in the right direction. So we
Unbelievable.
have to prepare. If you are one on medication and there gonna be long lines, take that medication with you. If you need something, take something with you. And that election day isn't a 1 day thing in our country. That you can vote before the actual day when the polls first open. If you're eligible to like the president of the United States to mail in your ballot,
Yes.
you need to do that as well. But for some of our strategy, particularly as it relates to the Black church, is we gotta move beyond just rallying at our church for our souls to the polls. This is when the Great Commission has to come into play because it shouldn't be about those who make their way to our houses of worship. We need to go ye into the world.
Ooh,
So a souls
yes.
on the poll, souls to the polls day should be an outreach day and not an inreach. That
Oh,
we're
that's
going into
good.
the community to make sure that our message known, and then we start doing that simple math. That if you registered to vote, you already voted, then you have an obligation to go ahead and register five more
Yep.
individuals.
Yeah.
I even raised the bar of where some of our power is. That people in your house ought not be able to sit down at the table unless they can prove that they're ready to vote or they have voted. It's funny how we decry the pressure that people might put on. Like there's so many people who have paid a price. We say that that's not right. Well, in this day and time, we have to dispense with all of the soft conversations that we have. We have to have the hard conversations and do everything within our power to convince and make sure that people vote, and in some cases dragging them to the poll. We can't afford the excuses that we present to ourselves.
Yeah, I think this is exciting. I hope that there's ways that we can work together, and that there's ways that Interfaith Alliance can help support that work. We also are giving out grants all across the country for organizing, and also to recognize that it is very possible that ICE will be deployed and they're going to be attempting to intimidate people around polling stations, and we have to be prepared for that, and we have to start getting trained up. Like, how are we going to make sure that people are not turned away and are not overly intimidated? A lot of Americans will be fearful to go to the polls to exercise their right because of the way that ICE has been so terribly abusing the American populace by rounding up people who they have no business rounding up, and so they've created fear. And so I just think there's a lot of really important work that is needs to be done, and it's especially important because right now you just I do see, unfortunately, in all those states, we see the kind of frothing at the mouth to strip the Black Americans and other Americans of their power to
And we have to
dilute the power.
and we have to to do what my friend, your friend Eddie Blard has brought attention to. We have to decide who we are
Hmm.
and who we want to be. And there are others deciding who they think we ought to be, but it's unimaginable. I can't imagine disdain of a former president, Jimmy Carter, right? Who, in his aftermath of being the president, would lead delegations to ensure fair and safe elections, fear of intimidation and suppression in other countries, to now find ourselves
That's
in
right.
need of that
That's
on
right.
our own soil,
Yes.
where it is taking place. That if anyone should have fair elections, those should take place in the United States. Gerrymandering does not allow for fair elections. Intimidation does not allow this suppression does not allow for fair elections. Who are we,
Yeah.
and who do we want to be? And the world is looking at us.
Yeah. And it's also like just, not to be continued, but I think all of it was revealed in the SAVE Act, this so-called SAVE Act, which was, really just a blatant disenfranchise effort that included,
Yes.
it was, there were, it included Black Americans, but really kind of everyone was on the chopping block. If you couldn't find, these, if you were a woman and your name before you got married, and like, could you go back and find that, and all of these terrible things that were all aimed at making it harder for people to vote. And I think and the negligible fraud. I mean, this is verifiable. The fraud in this country is actually negligible. It is like point zero something. This is not a problem. What these are is an effort, a recognition of unpopular policies, and deciding, well, the best way to fight that is to make less people be able to vote. So we're gonna keep talking about this. I look forward to hearing more about that as we go towards the
And
midterm.
and the fact that you mentioned those who are fearful of going to the polls, but we also had what's taking place in the last 5 or so years is a criminalizing of voting.
Hmm.
That people who have made mistakes as it relates to their voting were brought up on charges, and these false allegations that we have widespread
Right.
uh, voter fraud is amazing. And then there are those who have been charged
Right.
with fraud just because they were unaware that they weren't eligible to vote.
Yeah. And then of course there's all those instances of people calling fraud, 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 and then Republicans voting like 5 times. I mean, the hypocrisy of it all. Speaking of hypocrisy, I want to like lean into another important role and expertise that you have, and really get into what is an ongoing just mantra of this crazy Christian nationalist agenda that has kind of cloaked itself and used the term anti-Christian bias task force. And they recently put out a report basically outlining all the ways that our Catholic former President Biden, really just headed in for Christianity, and it's you kind of can't believe that American resources and taxpayer money is being put into these kind of efforts. I mean, some of them are, it's just so absurd what they keep on rehashing the same thing. Um, we can talk all about, you were there. I mean, you were in the White House. You understood, along with several other people, and people don't, there are religious leaders in all different different departments who are really on the lookout to make sure that everyone from different backgrounds is treated fairly. Um, so that how fallacious this is. How does something like that land with you as someone who really, as an ordained Baptist minister, who really so cared for the well-being of faithful people and tried to do that every day in the Biden White House?
Yeah, I think there are many paths to God, first of all. And that comes from a sense of respect, or that word respect.
Hmm.
I also remember in scripture, Jesus saying, I have other sheep that are not others' flock.
Hmm.
I think needs some sense, some time, there. I believe that there are people who live in our country who do not identify as Christian, who are of a higher moral standard than some who do identify as Christian. I don't think that wanting to be inclusive in our society is one grounds that then they are discriminated against. And people who say that do not know or have a thought of what it means to be religious and to be Christian in other places in this world. But we should be, and I'm one who believe in being inclusive in that space. And when I think about President Biden, who I remember having some personal conversation with about the church. One goes back to the Lyndon B. Johnson Library, where he and I was there with Andrew Young, and had a second, and the president was talking about the strength and how important the Black church had been to the Black community. And of course, I was smiling and thinking about how important the Black church had been to the same country. But he recognizes that some of his political power was because of folk in that Black church tradition. But here we are, and it'd be something if they were talking about discrimination and it relates to Christianity for all Christians, but there's being very specific and who they're talking about. So this white Christian nationalism is something that we have to take to task at each and every turn. We have to remind folk that Jesus didn't speak English,
Hmm.
that he spoke in an Aramaic Greek. He understood of the Hebrew. That our whole idea that Christianity is an American and a white American, a male construct, is so far
Mm.
from the truth, and those of us who believe otherwise must address that. That they have these narrow definitions of Christianity, these narrow definitions of what means to be American, these narrow definitions of what it means to be a citizen in this country. And what we witness here is not only a hijacking, is what Raphael Warnock talks about when he says that when it comes to Jesus, he's been a victim of identity theft.
Hmm. That's good. I also think like, you know, we are, this is also rooted in just this idea that, yeah, they get to decide one, what, if they, if they don't like, for instance, LGBT protections, um, and they're Christian, therefore LGBT protections are anti-Christian. And it's like, well, no, the majority of Christians in America actually support LGBTQ equality. So it's not that, you have a right to your opinion. I mean, everybody has a right, and they have a right to practice their life and their faith exactly as they wish. But it doesn't give them the right to impose that on others, and it doesn't give them the right to say I'm oppressed because everybody doesn't agree with me on this. I think one of the most egregious thing, and I know you remember this, was when Transgender Day of Visibility happened to fall on Easter. And that is not something that the Biden White House had anything to do with. The Biden White House had issued a formal proclamation about Easter, and which had no profanity in it. By the way, unlike Trump's proclamation this Easter. And then it just so happened that Transgender Day of Visibility also fell on that day, and the Biden White House just wanted to observe that, to, the humanity of trans people, many of whom, by the way, are Christian and are celebrating Easter as well. And so, and that became, they just saw an opportunity to drive a wedge. Do you remember that day?
Yes, I remember like it was yesterday. And we in the administration did what we're supposed to do, and that is acknowledge all of God's creation.
Mm.
And that means that we should observe and acknowledge Transgender Day of Remembrance. Um, the current administration took issue with those days that are not based on a political calendar, by the way, but they didn't even have the sense of mind to acknowledge Transgender Day when it did
Mm-mm.
not fall on Easter, which is a very telling sign. They could care
Right,
less,
right, right, right.
really. But in our country, there are days that overlap.
Just so
I,
happens. Yeah.
yeah, all the time. So that was a wedge trying to divide. And hopefully, we need to understand that and then try as much as we can to coalition build, to stand up for those who are being oppressed, those who are being marginalized, and let everyone know the full breadth of God's love for them.
Yeah. I mean, I am curious because, you've worked in the White House. And so it is, I mean, it's actually impossible to imagine someone like President Biden or President Obama or Jimmy Carter, for that, um, kind of saying the things that he said, or, we didn't have AI back then, but, if, um, kind of making an image of yourself as Jesus. I mean, doesn't it feel like, kind of cuckoo puffs? I mean, you're just kind of like, how is this happening? Because you were very closer than most of our listeners and most of us to, you were in the White House and you understand the importance of that office and the importance of that, the responsibility of that office. And then here you have someone who's playing so fast and loose with that. I'm curious how all of plus, this public and personal attack on Pope Leo, which by the president, but then also J.D. Vance, who has the wonderful distinction of having been reprimanded not by one but two popes. But imagine the White House as you understood it with this kind of, it's a degradation of the White House.
Yeah, it's funny that the vice president, a recent convert to the faith, would take the stance and the opinions, but he is he's what's wrong with the administration, because it's not just the president, it's those around him who say nothing, who don't stand up for anything, who are fearful of contradicting or saying something to the current president that he does not want to hear. And so my first thought about this is that there's one, I would have never went into the administration if the person I was supposed to work for displayed some of the characteristics
Yeah.
as a current. I would not have lasted
Mm.
the time that I did. If at any point in time I lost respect for the president, or did not feel as if I was able to speak my mind on behalf of the American people, that in fact that's what the president relied on me for, to give him those things that perhaps no one else around him would have shared with him, to have my pulse, to talk with people from various spheres, that at any point in time when it came to a decision that impacted my constituency, that I would be asked, well, what is the faith community saying about this?
Yes.
And that's the time that I would share and not withhold with the president.
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, the people around him are sometimes worse. I mean, you have Pete Hegseth quoting scripture that isn't real scripture. It's from Pulp Fiction. I mean, all these things. It's like, it's just compounded. Um, Let me ask you this final question. Like, in this moment, lots of things happening, lots of challenges ahead. Where do you find courage?
Well, I find courage from you, Paul.
Oh,
And what you're doing with the Interfaith Alliance and all the people that I see during the work. And I say that because there are people who are unaware, and I hear this all the time. What is the church doing? What are people of faith? And it's only because I work with folk like yourself and see Interfaith Alliance, see the William Barbers of the world out there, to see nuns who are
yeah,
doing the work, to see network lobbying doing the work, to see a religious leader head NCNW doing the work, and that I'm privy to know that the faith communities out there doing the work on a daily basis. My schedule can be filled up with people who are leading protests, people who are organizing, and I get strength from day to day, knowing I'm not the only one.
right.
Right. Thank you, Beatles. That there are other people who believe, who are committed to making sure that not one group of people with their ideology will be able to define what it means to be America. American in our country. So it's the people out there doing the work that people may not even know their names, working on tight budgets, if a budget at all, just trying to make sure their voices are heard. That gives me hope.
Reverend Thomas L. Bowen is General Secretary of the Progressive National Baptist Convention. A veteran of the Biden White House, he is affectionately known as DC's pastor. Pastor, thank you so much for joining me on The State of Belief. We so appreciate and are inspired and given courage from all you are doing.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Who do you know who would get a lot out of hearing this conversation with Reverend Thomas Bowen? Please share The State of Belief with them and be sure to subscribe to The State of Belief on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcast platform. We need your help to keep growing The State of Belief, so please make a financial contribution today at stateofbelief.com. That's stateofbelief.com. The views and opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily reflect those of Religion News Service or Religion News Foundation. This State of Belief is produced by Ray Kirstein and is a production of Interfaith Alliance. Become a member today at interfaithalliance.org. And be sure to join us next week. I can't wait. Until then, I'm Paul Brandeis Rauschenbusch on The State of Belief, where religion and democracy meet.